When my grandfather passed away, he left me his ranch in Florida. 25 acres of oak trees, rolling hills, and the kind of quiet you can't find in the city. The land had been in our family since 1962, and I felt lucky to inherit it. I'd been moving in for about 2 months, carrying furniture from my small apartment, breathing in the wide open air, finally beginning to feel at home. What I didn't expect was that my new neighbor, the president of the Sunset Valley HOA, would arrive at my fence and turn my peaceful inheritance into the strangest nightmare I'd ever experienced. It was a Tuesday morning when Catherine Stone stormed across my driveway. Perfect makeup at 7 a.m., navy blazer covered in little HOA pins, and laminated family trees clutched like legal documents. She looked like some suburban prosecutor ready to put me on trial. "You're trespassing on sacred family land," she screamed. Dogs barked 3 streets over. Curtains twitched. Phones lifted as neighbors recorded. I stood there holding a mug of coffee, watching this woman declare my ranch belonged to her ancestors, as if screaming loud enough could change history. The absurdity would have been funny if it hadn't felt like a performance staged for an audience. I had all the paperwork, deeds, surveys, county clerk statements, proving my land was outside her HOA. Bought decades before Sunset Valley even existed. None of that mattered to Catherine. She waved her fake genealogy charts and announced she'd return every day until I admitted guilt for some crime that existed only in her imagination. Then she stomped off, promising documentation and constitutional rights. That night, I found a folded note under my truck's windshield wiper. "She's not what she seems. A restraining order prevents direct contact. A friend." My blood ran cold. Who was warning me? Who was watching her? And why anonymously? True to her word, she came back the next morning, this time dressed in a Victorian morning gown with a black veil and antique jewelry. She set up a little altar at the property line, arranging props like a theater set: scrolls, a compass, even a leather-bound journal. At exactly 7, she stepped out of her SUV like an actress taking the stage, wailing and gesturing dramatically while joggers slowed down and kids gawked. I watched from the window in disbelief, half expecting applause. She wasn't just angry, she was acting out grief as though the land itself was a stage. My neighbor Tommy, a retired mechanic, leaned on his porch rail across the road and muttered, "She's been rehearsing for weeks. New boxes every day, costumes, props, divorce settlement money, I'd bet." He seemed more weary than surprised, sipping coffee like he'd seen this circus too long already. The next days only escalated. A county surveyor arrived at my request, clipboard in hand, and Catherine tried to convince her that modern maps had been corrupted, demanding ancestral navigation methods with her $60 compass. When that didn't work, Catherine hired 2 strangers, actors it turned out, posing as a grief counselor and family historian. They admitted to me later they'd been paid to validate her ancestral trauma. I couldn't believe it. She was literally bankrolling her own theater troupe with settlement money, and the notes kept coming. Each envelope tucked under my wiper grew more detailed. One listed her entire morning routine down to the minute: mirror practice at 6:30, makeup in her car at 6:45, props at 7 sharp. Another included professional photographs taken from the street, her closet full of costumes, jewelry tossed in the trash, even screenshots of her shopping for props online. Whoever was sending me this wasn't some nosy neighbor. They had surveillance skills and intimate knowledge of her habits. At first, I suspected Tommy, but his scribbled napkin notes were amateur compared to the precise reports I received. When I checked timestamps, he had alibis proving he wasn't even in town for some of the surveillance. Whoever was helping me wasn't him. The truth started to crack open when I noticed her mail, envelopes addressed to Catherine Miller. Digging into county records, I learned she'd recently divorced a man named David Miller after only 6 months of marriage. The divorce papers cited control issues and boundary disputes. Suddenly, everything fit. Her name change, the money for costumes, the escalating performances, and the anonymous warnings about restraining orders made sense. Her ex-husband couldn't approach her, but someone who'd lived with her would know her patterns better than anyone else. Meanwhile, Catherine's act spiraled further out of control. She bought a metal detector and staged discoveries of dollar store jewelry she'd buried herself. She pitched a tent at my property line, complete with lantern, cooler, posters, and a portable toilet, announcing she would remain until justice was served. Neighbors began calling her spectacle Radio Catherine after she brought in a megaphone and broadcasted violation alerts around the clock. Morning readings, afternoon updates, midnight rants, it was relentless. I couldn't leave my ranch without hearing her voice booming about ancestors that never existed. The entire subdivision grew weary, but the attention only fueled her. A local reporter filmed her shouting in costume, and the clip went viral. Strangers online laughed. Neighbors called county officials in desperation. Another anonymous envelope appeared, this time filled with a clinical psychological profile, detailed analysis of her behavior, predictions of escalation, and notes only someone close could know. It mentioned her nightly rehearsals, her need for props, and her drift into performance when shouting wasn't enough. No neighbor could have written that. Only someone who'd lived inside her daily life would recognize those cycles. At last, her vigil collapsed into full breakdown. Sleep-deprived, hoarse from shouting every 30 minutes for 3 days, she scrambled up my fence and declared herself the high priestess of ancestral guardians. Her eyes were wild, her voice cracked, her body trembling from exhaustion. Paramedics, counselors, and zoning officials had gathered to intervene, but she screamed about betrayal and abandonment, shouting, "My husband documented everything. He's planning revenge. He's watching me right now." It was heartbreaking and terrifying all at once. Her delusions weren't entirely wrong, just distorted. She did have someone watching her, but out of protection, not revenge. After hours of negotiation, she finally accepted a voluntary evaluation at the psychiatric facility. As officials helped her down, her purse spilled open, scattering divorce papers with David Miller's name and current address. Seeing them made me realize what I already knew. The anonymous helper was her ex-husband. Outside the facility, I noticed a man watching from a distance, middle-aged, exhausted, with an expression caught between concern and grief. When our eyes met, I recognized him before he spoke. "I'm David Miller," he said quietly. "I've been your anonymous helper." The shock was overwhelming, though it explained everything. He showed me documents, marriage records, counseling notes, his own 3-week log of her routines. He told me he'd known she would fixate on my property once she saw it in public records. "She destroyed our marriage with control obsessions," he said, "but I couldn't let her destroy your life, too." He wasn't acting out of spite. He was trying to protect both of us, bound by a restraining order that prevented direct contact. His only option had been to pass information secretly, arming me with knowledge without breaking the law. In the end, Catherine received the help she desperately needed. She moved into supervised care, where her control issues couldn't spill into neighbors' lives. David left Florida, started fresh, eventually remarried. I stayed on the ranch, finally free to enjoy the quiet my grandfather had cherished. The neighborhood healed, relieved to have peace instead of daily performances echoing through the streets. A year later, the ground where her tent once stood is green again. Kids ride their bikes past my gate. Neighbors lean on fences, swapping stories about gardens instead of conspiracies. Even the silence feels like a gift. Some mornings, I still wake before dawn, half expecting her white SUV to roll up at 6:45 sharp, but it never does. And when I walk the fence line with my dog, I remember that peace isn't just the absence of noise. It's knowing someone once stood in the shadows, watching, to make sure I got it back.